Hello, everybody. It's pretty late here. Kids have just gone to bed, and there is a storm outside, so it may be that I have to run and comfort three terrified children. And I apologise if that cuts things short, but I will do my best to march on. I won't do a summary today, except for the fact that Alex and Z and Simon and Lucy and a black suit have escaped the military compound, and they're trying to get to Alfred Furness, who lives basically on the other side of Alex has seen like a vision of him near the coast. Hang on, let me just sort this thing out. And they've just taken a detour just to try and get away to safety, because there are lots of strange creatures in the oh, I never does this. Strange creatures in the city. Come on. And sorry, I'm just making room. Oh, I don't know if you can hear that. There's some thunder. They are they're about to and they've been driving, and Alex has realised that they are about to go back to his old house. That's where they've been driving. Sorry, that's miles away there. Just trying to sort my computer out. Okay, so Alex is back home. An emotional chapter for me, anyway. Home. The black suit found a flashlight in the truck for Z and Lucy to use, though the full moon made it almost redundant. I looked at the house, bathed in a soft silver glow. It was just as I remembered. Only not. As though somebody had studied my memories and used them to create a replica of my house, getting it almost perfect, but messing up the small things, the details. The garden was too overgrown, the grass ankle length. It had been one thing my dad had always insisted on, keeping the small patch of green in good shape so that the neighbours wouldn't complain. A memory floated to the surface, so painful that it might have been barbed. Me as a kid, half my age now, helping him and my mum plant the rosebush that still sat by the low wall against the street, the one time they hadn't told me off for getting mud on my trousers. The thought made me feel like I'd been punched in the solar plexus, and I had to fight to stop from doubling over. I suddenly wondered what good could come from being here. Maybe we should just get back into the truck and keep driving, find somewhere else to take shelter. But Z and Lucy were already at the front door, peering inside. I followed cautiously, taking in more of those flawed details. A couple of the windows had been smashed, a pool of glass lying in the flower bed. Through the holes I could see that the curtain pole in the front room had been pulled out of the wall, lying diagonally and concealing the interior with rumpled velvet drapes. Another memory cut through the surface of my brain, the way my mum would always draw those curtains every night at dusk, the smell of the dust wafting through the living room as we sat down to eat dinner in front of the TV. "I don't think anyone's home," said Z. I waited for the relief, but instead it was sadness that gripped me. I guess some part of me had hoped they'd still be here, my mum and dad, even though they wouldn't recognise me now, even though they'd see me as a monster. I just wanted to bury my head in my mother's chest, the way I always did when I hurt myself. I wanted to feel my dad's arms around my shoulders. Between them, they'd once been able to make everything bad go away. But that had been a long, long time ago. "You sure you want to go in?" Lucy asked me as I approached the door. She reached out and touched my arm with her fingertips, leaving them there for a moment. "You don't know what you might find." "It's okay," I lied. "Let's just get out of the street before something sees us." Z and Lucy entered first, the flashlight cutting through the gloom. I walked after them, having to stoop under the doorframe that I'd once struggled to touch on my tiptoes. The door itself had been forced open, the wood split by a crowbar, flecks of red paint like dried blood on the welcome mat. Burglars, probably, I thought, trying to ignore the irony. Whoever it had been was long gone, though. I could sense that the house was empty the moment I stepped inside, the air cool and still, undisturbed. But then I took a breath, and the house was suddenly full. It was the smells, ones I never thought I'd experience again, reawakening the child inside me, like they'd been left here to help me remember. Like they'd been left here so I could imagine my mum and dad back into existence. The wax from my dad's barber jacket hanging on a hook in the hall, reminding me of holidays in the country, clambering over stone walls and traipsing through muddy fields. Incense from the bathroom, because my mum had always insisted we light it after we'd done our business. The herbs in the kitchen, the scent of basil filling the house with memories of the times I'd helped her cook, pulling off the leaves and smelling them on my fingers for the rest of the day. And dewberry, stronger than anything else, so strong and so fresh it could have been ebbing from the very structure of the house. My mum had worn it every day, some kind of moisturiser or something, and I'd never really noticed the fragrance before now. With that smell, she was there. They were both there, standing in the hallway, smiling at me in a way they hadn't done since I'd become a criminal, since I'd broken their hearts. I clamped my eyes shut, holding the image there, praying that if I willed it enough, if I really believed it, that all of this would go away. Maybe I could open my eyes and they'd really be here. I'd never have stolen that 20 quid all those years ago, never have broken into that house with Toby, never have been buried alive in Furness Penitentiary. I could just wake up and be that kid again, the one who helped his mum cook and helped his dad plant rose bushes, and who just wanted to learn magic tricks. Please, I said to them, and I'm not sure if the words were spoken out loud or just in my head. Please let them come back. I'm sorry, you know I am. I don't look like me anymore, but I still am. It's still me. Please, Mum, I just want to come home. It was too much. My stomach churning and my head spinning. My grief was like an engine inside me, roaring to life, tears rolling down my cheeks, my body racked by great, heaving, bittersweet sobs. My mum and dad held out their hands to me, and I fell towards them, feeling like I could shed this body, step out of it like a crab from its shell, walk right back into my old life. There was a crash, a tearing sound, and I opened my eyes to see that my bladed hand had slashed through the coats in the hall, knocking over the telephone table and sending the glass key bowl flying. The shot of adrenaline rocked me, and I looked back at my dad, ready to apologise, to say it was an accident, to say I'd pay for a new one. But they were gone, of course. The engine of my grief stalled, and I stood there in the hall, blinking away the tears, my mouth hanging open, feeling like I'd been wrung dry, every last iota of strength squeezed from my pores. I felt a hand on my arm, looked down to see Z there, moisture pearled in his eyes. He was biting his bottom lip, trying to hold back his own emotions, but he still managed a half smile. I realised everybody else was watching me sadly. Even the black suit seemed to have run out of cruel remarks. "Come on," Z said, his voice cracking. "Let's find you a place to sit down before you fall down." I didn't answer. I just let him guide me through the door to the left into our small sitting room. I knew what to expect this time, trying to build a wall against my senses, but I could still feel the memories there, hammering on it, demanding to come in. I collapsed onto the sofa, my arms splayed halfway across the floor, and I just sat there, trying not to think, trying not to exist, trying not to breathe in the smells, those ghostly echoes, the last thing that remained of my mum and dad. I don't know how much later it was that I started to come around, drifting out of my exhaustion to see that I was alone in the night-filled sitting room. I could hear voices coming from somewhere though, and with no little effort I managed to push myself from the sofa to try to find them. Gentle firelight flickered from the kitchen, and I stumbled towards it to see Z, Simon and Lucy inside. They were sitting around the breakfast table, the candles between them drenching the room in warmth. They looked up when they heard me enter, welcoming me with a parade of sympathetic smiles. They all looked exhausted, and I wondered if they'd been talking about their own homes and their own families. "Hey," said Simon. "How are you doing?" We thought we should leave you alone, Z said before I could reply. You look like you could do with some space. I used my left hand to pull a chair out from beneath the table, sitting in it. Thanks, guys, I said, shivering. It's just, weird, I guess, being back here. They nodded. I'm just making a cuppa, said Lucy. I could hear bubbling, realised that there was a saucepan of water heating up on the stove. The electricity was out, but the gas was obviously still working. Nice to see gas being used for something other than blowing stuff up, I said. Z smiled, and I could see in the brightening of his eyes that he was remembering when we'd used the gas to blow up the chipping room floor inside Furness Penitentiary. A lifetime ago. Lucy frowned, looking like she was going to demand an explanation, then obviously deciding not to. She got up, adding another cup to the ones that were already on the counter. Can you drink tea, or will it make you puke? She asked. I didn't honestly know the answer to that. My system couldn't handle ordinary food anymore because of the nectar, as Lucy knew all too well after watching me throw up a burger on the day we'd met her, but I could still drink water. Only one way of finding out, I said. Gotta still be able to drink tea, Z said, shaking his head. Might as well top yourself right now if you can't. Where's the suit? I asked. Outside, said Simon. Said he's keeping watch, but I think he's gone to find some new clothes. Just as well, really. I mean, did you see that surgical gown thing he was wearing? Every time he moved, I thought his junk was going to fall out. Simon! Lucy said, full of mock outrage, clipping him around the back of the head and doubling the level of laughter. It was weird. Good weird. Sitting around the kitchen table making jokes, just like having mates around after school or something. What? Simon said, lifting his hands. It's true. If there were any cops left in the city, it'd have been done for indecent exposure. Speaking of which. He nodded at me, and I realised I was still wearing my surgical gown too. There isn't a single thing in this house that will still fit me, I said, resigning myself to it. The pan began to rattle, and Lucy wrapped a tea towel around the handle, lifting it up and carefully sharing the water between the cups. The tea-infused steam was another smell that brought back a fistful of memories, and I let them come. Better to open the door for them, even if they're sad, than to let them burn your house down from the outside. I pictured myself standing right where Lucy was, years and years ago, making my first ever cup of tea, a surprise for my dad. It had been half milk and half warmish water, with the merest dip of a tea bag in it, but he told me it was the best cuppa he'd ever had. Did you guys find something to eat? I asked. I'm sure there's stuff in the cupboards. Z's already gone through the whole pack of cereal bars, Lucy said, opening the lightless fridge and pulling out a bottle of milk. She sniffed it, pulling her face. Probably not the freshest it's ever been, but it'll have to do. He's also eaten a can of cold beans and a packet of cheese slices, Simon said. I was hungry, Z protested. You're always hungry, muttered Simon, smiling. Oh, and we found something on the fridge. We're not quite sure what it is, but it looks like it could be evidence of a new monster, something truly awful that Furness has been saving. I'm not sure if I should even show you. It's so horrendous. What? I asked, genuinely confused. Simon handed me a photograph and I flipped it over to see a kid, maybe 6 years old, beaming at the camera, half his teeth missing, his hair a mess, a pair of black glasses perched unevenly on his small nose. At first I didn't recognise him. Then I looked at those eyes, the ones that had stared back at me from the mirror for 14 years of my life, before the warden's scalpels had taken them. For an instant, I was back inside that kid's head, at school for the yearly photo, my whole class there with me. I remembered that day, the flash of the camera leaving traces on my vision for the whole of lunchtime. It seemed impossible that the same kid had somehow grown into me, this twisted beast of torn flesh. Simon was right. That kid had become one of Furness's monsters. Something truly awful. I put the photo on the table, pushing it away, swallowing the bile back down. Whoa, sorry, man, said Simon. It was just a joke. I didn't mean anything by it. It's fine, I said. I'm just feeling a little fragile right now. Don't worry about it. Here you go, said Lucy, placing a cup of tea in front of me. This should help. I looked at the tea, worried that if I tasted it I'd break down into another fit of tears. I pushed myself up, using my bladed hand as a crutch. I'll be back for it in a bit, I said. I just want to take a look around, make sure nobody's here. Already done, said Z. We searched the place top to bottom. I nodded at them, walking back into the hall. It was a small house, and the only other room downstairs was the dining room. My dad had used it as an office, and when I ducked my head inside, I saw that it was still packed full of paperwork and books, receipts and bills and other stuff piled high on every available surface. I left it alone, making my way slowly up the stairs. I was so tall now that I had to crouch beneath the landing, the sheer size of my arm making it awkward. I got there eventually, checking out the bathroom and my parents' bedroom, plus the small storeroom that was also heaving with junk. My bedroom was at the end of the hallway. I'd taken the chunky Alex stickers off the door a while back, but their outline was still there in the flaking paint. I put my good hand against them, assaulted by my past, the tide showing no sign of stopping. It hurt, but I welcomed the pain because it meant I was recovering. It was the same pain as surgery, only this time I wasn't being hacked apart by blades, I was being repaired by memories. Each one chipped away a little more of the warden's work, turning me back into the kid I'd been before. I looked in, my silver eyes peeling apart the darkness. It was a lifetime ago that I'd last been here, but I remembered it like it was yesterday. Of course I did. It was my last day of freedom. I'd gotten up that morning knowing I was going to burgle a house, relishing the thought of something for nothing. My bed had been made since then, and the old clothes I'd left strewn across the floor had been washed and folded, but nothing else had been touched. The same posters hung on the wall, the same DVDs and video games littered my desk, the same drawers stood open. I walked inside, barely able to stand upright without hitting the ceiling. I was so tall that I could see on top of the wardrobe. There was a pile of magic kits there, the cardboard boxes torn and dust-covered, a home for spiders. I could never quite bring myself to throw them away. I thought about getting them out now, taking a card trick downstairs to show the others. I could probably still recall how to do the simple ones. But even as I was reaching up for them, I saw my hands, realised I'd never do a magic trick again. Although the fat digits on my left hand seemed longer now, more fully formed, the changes were too slow to see, like a plant growing. I sighed, my bladed arm thudding to the carpet. I went to leave, and that's when I saw it, on my desk. It was a photograph, and I almost didn't register it until I remembered that I'd never kept photos in my room, too embarrassed about my family to display them to my mates. I walked over and picked it up with my new fingers. It was my mum and dad, on a pier in the middle of a summer's day, both of them holding ice creams and smiling with cream-covered lips. My dad's cone didn't have any ice cream in it because it had just fallen out, tumbling over the edge into the waves. In between them was me, older than in the picture downstairs, maybe 10 or 11. No, I was 12. I knew that because it was the last week of the holidays, before I'd gone back to school, before I'd stolen that 20 quid from Daniel Richards, before I'd changed. We looked so happy that it was almost artificial, like somebody had photoshopped it. But we had been happy back then. That summer, that day on the beach, it had been one of the happiest days of my life. I felt the tears clustering again, that awful pressure in my throat, like something huge was crawling up it, trying to get out. My parents had left this photo here for me. They must have believed I'd come back. Beneath the photo was a pile of paper, legal documents by the look of them. I read the header on the first page. Alex Sawyer, appeal hearing denied. It was the same on the second and the third. There were 7 in all. 7 times that my parents had tried to appeal my sentence, get me out of Furness. All rejected. I couldn't believe it. I put the photo down, my hand trembling, then thought better of it and turned it over. On the back were 3 neat lines in blue ink. and I recognised the small, sloping capital letters as those of my dad. I read it once, my legs buckling, dropping me to my knees. I read it again, so many tears now that I couldn't make out the words, couldn't be sure they were real. But they were. I didn't need to see them to know what they said. Those 3 lines of text were engraved on my mind, on my heart. I would never, ever forget them. Alex, we're sorry. We forgive you. We hope you'll forgive us too. We love you so much. Mum and Dad. I'm going to end it there, partly because I'm still worried about this storm waking up the kids, and partly because that's just such a lovely chapter, and yeah, really emotional actually. The idea of going back into your childhood home, always really emotional. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I'll be back tomorrow, Monday again tomorrow. I should be back to my regular schedule, and we will move on towards the end of execution. And yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a slightly different type of chapter, but sometimes we need those emotional beats in the story. And yeah, sad. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. I hope you have a really nice night.